There are moments in the long and complicated history of American military engagement in the Middle East when the scale of what is actually happening fails to register with the urgency it deserves, when the language of press briefings and presidential statements smooths over the jagged reality of what is unfolding on the ground, in the air, and on the water in one of the most strategically vital and historically volatile regions on the face of the earth. This is one of those moments. Right now, at this very hour, the United States military and the Israeli Defense Forces are conducting simultaneous coordinated strikes against hundreds of targets inside Iran every single day. Every single day. Not occasionally, not in response to a specific provocation. Every day, in a sustained military campaign of a scale and intensity that, if it were happening anywhere else in the world, would dominate every headline, every broadcast, every conversation in every household in America. And tonight the stakes have grown even higher, because the conflict that President Trump has been describing as an easy American victory has now reached into Saudi Arabia, where an Iranian attack on a key American military installation has damaged United States Air Force refueling tankers and left approximately a dozen American service members injured. The war that was supposed to be going easily just got considerably more complicated. And the clock is ticking toward a presidential deadline that is now just days away. To bring you the full picture of what is happening tonight, we go directly to our correspondent Jonathan Hunt, reporting live from Israel, where the weight of this regional conflict is felt with particular acuity, and where the partnership between the United States military and the Israeli Defense Forces has reshaped the strategic landscape of the entire Middle East in ways that analysts and historians will be studying for decades to come. Hunt's reporting tonight carries with it a series of developments that demand careful attention and clear-eyed examination. Let us walk through each of them in turn, with the full context and background that this moment in history requires. The most immediately alarming piece of news to emerge on this Wednesday evening concerns what appears to be a successful Iranian strike on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Iran launched an attack on this strategically critical installation, and that attack has apparently succeeded in damaging at least several United States Air Force refueling tankers stationed there. Beyond the equipment damage, and this is the number that matters most to every American watching tonight, approximately a dozen United States service members have been injured in this attack. The Pentagon has not yet released a full accounting of the incident, and further details are being awaited with urgency. But what is already clear is significant. Iran, a country whose air defense capabilities President Trump has publicly described as essentially non-existent, has demonstrated the ability and the willingness to strike American military assets on the soil of one of America's most important regional partners. That is not a small development. That is a warning shot of considerable consequence. The Prince Sultan Air Base, located in Al-Kharj, Saudi Arabia, approximately 100 kilometers southeast of the Saudi capital Riyadh, has long been one of the most important American military installations in the entire Middle East region. Named after the late Saudi Crown Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz, the base has served as a critical hub for American air operations throughout multiple conflicts and periods of regional tension dating back decades. During Operation Desert Storm in 1991, Prince Sultan hosted thousands of American troops and served as a staging ground for air operations against Iraqi forces. It has been central to American force projection capabilities in the Gulf region ever since. The presence of American Air Force refueling tankers at the base is not incidental. Aerial refueling capability is the lifeblood of sustained air campaigns. Tankers are the aircraft that allow fighter jets, bombers, and surveillance planes to remain airborne for extended periods, dramatically extending their range and operational effectiveness. Damaging those tankers, even several of them, is not merely a symbolic act. It is an attempt to degrade the logistical backbone of American air operations in the region. President Trump, speaking publicly about the state of the American military campaign against Iran, has maintained a tone of confident optimism that stands in notable contrast to the complexity and danger of what is unfolding on multiple fronts. In remarks captured and broadcast this evening, the president described the American position in terms that emphasized total air superiority. He noted that Iran has no anti-aircraft capability remaining, described American aircraft as floating over the top of Iranian territory, looking for whatever targets they choose to engage, and stated that 3,554 targets remain to be struck, adding that this work will be completed pretty quickly. The specific number, 3,554 remaining targets, is a figure that carries its own remarkable weight. It suggests a target list of extraordinary breadth and depth, encompassing military installations, regime infrastructure, command and control facilities, and other assets across an entire nation of nearly 90 million people. The methodical, almost bureaucratic precision of that specific number, offered publicly by a sitting president describing an ongoing military campaign, is itself a statement of intent unlike almost anything seen in recent American military history. To fully understand the context of what is happening right now, it is necessary to travel back through the history of American military engagement with Iran and the broader arc of relations between the two countries across more than 4 decades. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States have existed in a state of profound mutual hostility since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, which brought Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini to power and culminated in the seizure of the American embassy in Tehran and the holding of 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. That foundational rupture has shaped every subsequent interaction between the two nations. Through the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, during which the United States provided intelligence and material support to Saddam Hussein's Iraq against Iran, through the tanker wars in the Persian Gulf in the late 1980s when American naval forces directly engaged Iranian vessels, through the nuclear negotiations of the Obama era that produced the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015, through President Trump's withdrawal from that agreement during his first term in office, through the assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani by an American drone strike in January 2020, and through the subsequent cycles of escalation and threatened retaliation, the relationship between Washington and Tehran has been defined by mutual suspicion, periodic crisis, and the constant shadow of potential open conflict. What is happening now represents something qualitatively different from all of those previous episodes. The current campaign, involving daily coordinated strikes by both American and Israeli forces against hundreds of Iranian targets, is not a single retaliatory strike, not a targeted assassination, not a naval skirmish. It is a sustained military campaign of a scale and duration that has moved the United States into a state of active warfare with Iran in ways that previous administrations carefully avoided. The question of how this campaign ends, what its objectives are in operational terms beyond the destruction of the listed targets, and what political outcome the United States and Israel are seeking to achieve, are questions that remain, at least in the public domain, significantly unanswered. The Strait of Hormuz situation represents perhaps the single most economically consequential dimension of this conflict for the global economy and for American consumers at home. The strait, a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf between the coast of Iran and the coast of Oman, is the most important oil transit choke point in the entire world. Approximately 20% of the world's total oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day under normal circumstances. Crude oil from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran itself, along with liquefied natural gas from Qatar, all flow through this narrow passage to markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. When the strait is closed or significantly disrupted, the effects ripple through every oil-dependent economy on the planet with extraordinary speed. The strait remains, as of this evening, all but closed to commercial shipping. The United States military has not yet reopened it, and the question of whether the reluctance to do so reflects military inability or strategic calculation remains a subject of considerable debate among analysts and observers. What is not in debate are the economic consequences. Markets are down, the price of oil is up, every American who drives a car, heats a home, or purchases goods transported by fuel-dependent supply chains is already beginning to feel the early effects of a disruption that shows no immediate signs of resolution. The Iranian response to the military pressure being applied against them has taken several forms, some military and some rhetorical. On the military side, the attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia is the most dramatic and consequential development of this particular news cycle. It demonstrates Iranian willingness to expand the geographic scope of the conflict beyond their own borders, to strike at American assets on the territory of a country that has long sought to maintain a complicated balancing act in its relationships with both Washington and Tehran. Saudi Arabia, which normalized aspects of its relationship with Iran through Chinese brokered diplomacy in 2023, now finds itself directly in the crossfire of a conflict it did not choose and cannot easily escape. The domestic political implications for the Saudi leadership, which has invested enormous diplomatic capital in reducing regional tensions, are significant and still unfolding. On the rhetorical front, the Iranian parliamentary speaker took to the social media platform X on Wednesday to deliver a pointed and deliberately provocative message directed at President Trump, the American administration. In language notable for its confidence and its contempt, the speaker accused American officials of spreading what he termed fake news in an attempt to push energy prices down, and suggested that global markets have become, in his framing, numb to American messaging on the subject. "Keep going," the speaker wrote, "nobody is buying it anymore." The statement is, of course, propaganda. It is the product of a government that has every incentive to project strength and confidence regardless of the actual military situation on the ground. But it is also a window into the Iranian leadership's calculation that public defiance, maintained consistently and loudly, serves their domestic political interests and their negotiating position simultaneously. A regime that publicly surrenders to American military pressure loses legitimacy at home in ways that could be existential. So the defiance continues, even as President Trump tells a different story about what is happening behind closed doors. And that brings us to one of the most significant and under-examined tensions in the current situation. President Trump has stated publicly that Iran is negotiating privately, even as Iranian officials maintain their posture of public defiance. If both of these things are true simultaneously, it describes a diplomatic situation of considerable delicacy and complexity. Iran negotiating secretly while talking tough publicly is entirely consistent with how the Iranian government has conducted itself across multiple administrations and multiple rounds of nuclear and regional diplomacy. It is also consistent with the domestic political constraints that Iranian leaders face, where any appearance of capitulation to American military pressure would be exploited by hardline factions within the Iranian political system. The question is whether the private negotiations that President Trump references have sufficient substance and momentum to produce meaningful progress before the deadline that the president himself has set. That deadline is Monday, April 6th. President Trump has established April 6th as the date by which real progress in any negotiated resolution of this conflict must be made. The deadline is now days away, and the gap between the public postures of the two sides, American confidence and Iranian defiance, and the private diplomatic activity that may or may not be occurring, creates an atmosphere of profound uncertainty. What happens if April 6th arrives without the progress the president has demanded? Does the military campaign intensify? Does the target list, already numbering in the thousands of remaining targets by the president's own accounting, expand further? Does the geographic scope of the conflict widen beyond Iran's borders and Saudi Arabia to encompass other regional actors? These are questions for which there are no publicly available answers tonight. The key figures in this developing story span governments, militaries, and institutions across multiple countries. President Trump is the Central American actor, simultaneously the commander of the military campaign, the principal diplomatic interlocutor, and the political figure whose credibility is most directly tied to the outcome of a conflict he has promised will be won easily. The tension between that promise of easy victory and the emerging reality of American troops injured in Saudi Arabia, a closed Strait of Hormuz, and an Iranian government still publicly talking tough, is a tension that will only grow more acute as the days pass and the April 6th deadline approaches. Israeli leadership, whose military forces are conducting parallel and coordinated strikes against Iranian targets, has its own set of objectives and constraints that do not perfectly align with American ones, as has been true throughout the history of the American-Israeli security partnership. The Iranian leadership, navigating between the military pressure being applied against them and the domestic political imperatives that demand a show of strength, is pursuing a strategy whose ultimate direction remains genuinely unclear. Political analysts watching this conflict have noted several dimensions that deserve careful attention. The attack on Prince Sultan Base represents a significant escalation in Iranian willingness to strike at American assets beyond Iranian territory, a threshold that has not been crossed in this way before. The continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the American military's apparent inability or unwillingness to reopen it suggests that the easy victory narrative being offered publicly may not fully capture the operational challenges on the ground. The global economic implications of a prolonged Hormuz closure, measured in higher oil prices, disrupted supply chains, and financial market volatility, add an economic pressure on the American administration that exists alongside the military and diplomatic pressures, and the April 6th deadline, now only days away, creates a moment of decision that will test the credibility of American commitment to both military escalation and diplomatic resolution simultaneously. In the coming days, the questions that matter most are specific and urgent. Will the full accounting of the Prince Sultan Base attack reveal more damage and more American casualties than the initial reports suggest? Will the United States military take action to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and if so, at what cost and with what risk of further escalation? Will the private negotiations that President Trump references produce any publicly visible progress before the April 6th deadline? And if that deadline passes without the progress the president has demanded, what comes next in a military campaign that is already striking thousands of targets inside a country of 90 million people? These are not abstract questions. They are questions about war and peace, about the lives of American service members, about the stability of a global economy that runs on oil, that flows through a strait that is currently closed, and about the credibility of American power and American diplomacy in a moment of maximum uncertainty. What is clear tonight, as Jonathan Hunt reports from Israel, and as the Wall Street Journal's reporting on the Prince Sultan Base attack reaches audiences across the country, is that the easy victory narrative has encountered the stubborn resistance of a reality that is considerably more complicated. American service members have been injured. American military equipment has been damaged. A critical global waterway remains closed. A presidential deadline is approaching. And on the floor of the Strait of Hormuz and in the skies over Tehran, the consequences of decisions being made in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran are being written in real time. We will continue to follow every development as it emerges. Stay with us.